Hi, Cassidy. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hi.
Nice to see your smile today. For those of you watching, you can watch on YouTube or you can listen on any of your podcast channels. So we like to have the flexibility because that's what caregivers need, right?
Yeah.
And we also like to kick off the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast with words of inspiration, motivation, something from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. So I would love to get your thoughts on this, Cassidy.
All
Usually,
right.
usually there's something to help us be happier or healthier. So this one says, oh, it's short and sweet. It just says, happiness is an inside job.
Absolutely. It totally is.
I know. Like a lot of times, I think I had to learn in caregiving, lessons about letting go. And I think sometimes it's just reframing things um, could have a big impact on my day.
Absolutely. Well, I think that happiness is absolutely an inside job. We try to find happiness in so many other places instead of going within ourselves to find what that is. So I'm totally on board with happiness is an inside
Yeah,
job.
that's so true. I know I have lots of crazy things on the rise. Well, wanted you to have an opportunity to just share a little bit about your personal caregiving story with your dad. Um,
Yeah.
when did you know you were a caregiver? What did that season of your life look like?
So I was a certified nurse's aide long before my dad ever needed care. And I always like to say he got lucky when it came to daughters because I had been providing care to people. Gosh, it'll be almost 19 years this July that I've been providing care. But I started actually, I want to say like the progression to providing my dad with care was slowly as most caregivers, we start to do these little things that they can't do. Like maybe it's get groceries, maybe it's do the laundry, pick up the prescriptions, these little things. But my dad was a young man. My dad was 66 years old when he died of
Wow.
COPD and emphysema. Yeah. So I want to say he spent a little over a year on hospice services. So he started hospice, actually got admitted to hospice on January 31st of 2018. So all of 2019. And let's see, 4 months into 2020. Then he passed. So I basically was caring for him before he got on hospice, but it really took a nosedive. So I really then had to pick up a lot of those responsibilities. So I was still working hospice all day, every day, Monday through Friday. And then my evenings were spent with my dad. And then I went to bed and I did it all again. And my weekends were for myself. Actually, I gave myself 1 day a week in that time frame to for myself.
Good.
Um, but he was still a young man and he could tootle around his house and he could take care of himself as far as like going to the bathroom. But he lived on the second floor and it was getting really hard for him to get up and down the stairs. Right. So I moved him. I found an apartment in the same complex on the second floor. So I, a little bit about myself in regards to my dad is that I have a brother, but he's pretty non-involved. He was non-involved with my dad's care
Mhm.
because he struggles in his own life. So I was kind of the one to hold that up. So I didn't have a lot of family here in Washington state besides some, family friends to help me. So I kind of just put out the call and rallied my friends. And I was very, very blessed that the people in my life were able to help me move him downstairs into a brand new apartment for himself. And he stayed there for about 6 months. And then I had to move him into an adult family home because it got unsafe for him to be home on his own. And at 35, or maybe I was 34 at that time, I couldn't quit my job. So I had to make the devastating choice to place my dad. And that was a hard, hard thing to do. So yeah, that's kind of what my life looked like there.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
many things there, Cassidy. Like, I mean, first of all, we have some commonality with my mom also had COPD, and
Hmm.
she also passed in 2020 and in the fall of 2020.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious, like I had someone interviewed me for a podcast and they were talking about the waiting room revolution. I'll link to it in the show notes. But they had asked me, like, did someone share with me the trajectory of what that COPD diagnosis would look like? And it's also like she caught my word slip because I said caregiver diagnosis too. It's like this informs your life as much as it informs their life. Did you have that? Like, did someone offer that to you, or did you just know what was coming because of your CNA experience?
Absolutely. So I want to say, I mean, so my dad was definitely a longtime smoker, right? But my dad also did steel work, right? So he tore down asbestos smelters. He built underwater pipelines. He cut and welded steel for 34 years. So I don't think it was quite just the smoking. I think all of those things came together. But there was a moment I remember we went back to Massachusetts and I said to him, I said, Dad, I think you really need to quit smoking. And I just kind of told him, I said, I take care of people who struggle to breathe every day and just don't do it to me. And that was probably, I want to say 7 or 8 years before he actually passed away. So nobody ever said to me, this is what COPD and emphysema is going to be like. But, caring for people with these, comorbidities, for sure, I knew what was coming down the pipeline. Did I ever really understand until I was on the other side of that and how it was going to affect me to watch my dad deteriorate like that? Never. Nothing ever prepares you to
I know.
walk that journey with your loved one.
It's so true. And you're so young.
I know, right?
I know. Yes, yes. And well, I think COPD is difficult to watch with
Oh, it is.
emphysema. And I'm glad that you knew about the hospice and the palliative care options that you have.
Hmm.
What do you, I mean, maybe share a little bit about that for people who are not familiar with the differences. And when do you recommend that people think about asking about that?
Well, so not only as a CNA, so I've been a CNA for 19 years, but I recently just um, took my exam to really solidify my specialty. I got certified in hospice and palliative care as a nurse's aide. So that's a specialty that I hold now. But the difference between hospice and palliative care, they are massive, right? So palliative care allows you to consult with doctors and nurses from the minute you get a diagnosis. And that is basically a team of people who support you in going over your care options, allows you to continue treatment,
Mhm.
right? And offers nursing visits at home, manages pain. And so the difference between palliative care and hospice is when we have 6 months or less to live with a diagnosis, which is not always everybody's end of life journey is as unique to themselves as their soul is. So I feel like we have many people who graduate hospice. We have many people who are on hospice for years and they have a slow and steady decline. But the main difference between palliative care and hospice is we are no longer seeking life-saving treatments. We are focusing on comfort and quality of life. We now have access to DME, direct medical equipment, to medications to be delivered to the home, to home health aides, and not just nurses and doctors overseeing your care. They are an active part of your care on hospice.
Mhm.
And so I always say, and it's actually my plea. If you are having a loved one with a decline, they're not eating, they've had an increase in incontinence, decrease in mobility, I absolutely encourage you to call and ask for a hospice evaluation.
Where do they
Because the
make that
soon
call? Just
So you can call your doctor, or you can actually call any hospice directly, and they have an intake department, and you can say, I'm noticing this, this, and that. And I would love it if you would come out and make an evaluation. They will do that. They also do a lot of information. If you just want somebody to come out and talk to you about hospice and palliative care, they'll absolutely send somebody out to talk to you about those programs. But most of the time it comes from doctors. One thing I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of people are getting discharged from hospitals, especially in this COVID era, as things have ramped up in our hospitals. We have a lot of people who are being discharged home on home health or hospice services. It relieves the bed shortage in the hospital, and then so we're seeing a lot of people come home on hospice at this point in time, but a doctor does have to ultimately sign off eligibility for that person to be on hospice services.
interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, I know, I've been through, my mom was on hospice 2 years, at least, and then we've had hospice journeys with other loved ones. And I know for our circumstances, we had to always initiate the conversation about
Yep.
it, which was frustrating. And the first time I ever asked somebody about it, I felt like the worst daughter in the world. It was like, how dare you? Like what you're giving up on your mom? Like it was just was not a great experience. But I hope that doesn't happen for other people. And like you said, that's why if you not comfortable asking the doctor, just call a hospice facility, I think is a great tip.
Absolutely. They'll absolutely come out. And the other thing too is that we've already established that I work in hospice, but I'm also an end of life doula. So it's really, you can call any end of life doula in your local area. Just Google end of life doula in wherever you live, and they'll absolutely talk to you about hospice, and determine whether or not that's something that you want to do, before you make the call to the hospice. Or if you're feeling like that's something that's coming down the pipeline and you're having a hard time talking to your family about it, end of life doulas are really great about holding, an objective opinion, and open up a space for people to talk about death and dying. So we get a lot of people who come on hospice services who don't want to be on hospice services because it means death and dying to them. And although that's true, there's so many different aspects that go into that entire journey. And so I think we just always need more education. And the hospice platform and the hospice world is a lot different from the normal healthcare world. It's not, it's an interdisciplinary platform, right? So your home health aide, your chaplain, your nurse, your social worker, your doctor, they're all sitting down every single week, and we talk about our patients, and everybody's voice gets heard in that. Whereas in normal healthcare, our doctor is the be all end all. And if they are not on the end of life train and quality over quantity, that is where we run into these issues of talking about and initiating hospice. And it's funny because my dad had his he finally had his exacerbation, right? So it kept going down. Like first we need inhalers, now we need oxygen. Well, now you can't even walk 25 feet without seriously having an issue. And so that was the conversation and it was funny kind of watching this doctor come in and talk to me. And maybe because I have a hospice background, she was really trying to tread lightly around the we should go home on hospice now conversation. And I just held up my hand and I said, well, you will never struggle in this family to have an end of life conversation. So talk to me real and tell me how it is. And I actually had to initiate calling my own hospice to get my dad on services because, of course, it was a breakdown in healthcare. We didn't have liaisons in the hospital my father was at. So I actually called our own intake team and started everything.
Well, I mean, where so many of us are just advocates for and thank God, our family members had us. I walk by these empty hospital rooms sometimes with no family members. I'm like, who does it for these people?
I know.
And I wish the healthcare system worked more like the way that you described the hospice. First of all, the way you described it is wonderful.
Oh, good.
I love the quality over quantity thing that you said. And, we call it anyone that works in that end of life space with the hospice and so forth, end of life doula, like you all are angels on earth, because it's a hard, difficult time for families. You introduced me to a new term on your website. I saw
Okay.
you said you're a doula giver specialist. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So what is that, and what kind of services do they offer?
So, so I took my end of life doula training from Suzanne O'Brien, who has doula givers. She trains end of life doulas, and a specialist. So is somebody who is not only an end of life doula, but somebody who's also an elder care doula, and
Mhm.
somebody who also is a care consultant. Right? You're sitting down and you're doing advanced directives, you're having family conversations, you're making that plan with people while they're well before we even get to hospice services. Because so many people, I think that's really what moved me to become an end of life doula is I would show up as a CNA and people are hours from passing and their families have gotten here and they don't have wills. They're asking me about all of these things. And it was like, who, how did we get here? How did you get all the way here? And nobody sat down and told you that this is what needs to happen, or this is what you should have, you should be doing, you know?
It's
So
amazing. It's like we're all. This is not news, but we are all going to die. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
unequivocally. So a specialist is somebody who is absolutely trained and holds certificates on all of those aspects of end of life care.
I love it. And another term I heard or saw on your website was death cafe. I was like, what's a
Yes.
death cafe?
Yay! So I actually held. I'm going to be holding them monthly. I held our October's Death Cafe just this last Sunday, and so the Death Cafe was and is part of what we call the Death Positive movement. So you're seeing end of life doulas really come into play right now and gain a lot of momentum because there's a death positive movement at this point in time. And of course, this is not new. As long as people have been living, we have been dying, and people have been caring for the dying and caring for the dead. So long before there was a certification, these were women or men, primarily women in our communities who would be there to provide after death care, to be there to hold vigil with somebody while they were dying. And now we are seeing a wave of people who are enlightening themselves and their communities about death and dying. And a death cafe is to hold space for that. It's an agenda-free hour where pre-COVID, we were able to go to a library, or sometimes funeral homes actually hold these and sponsor these, or a regular cafe where we would meet, have coffee, talk about death and dying for one whole hour. And so it's really now gone virtual. And there are some people who are holding them in person in your communities. Death Cafe is actually a nonprofit organization that has a registry that you can go to. So deathcafe.com, or maybe it's .org. I'm not sure which one.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, so you can actually pull up their calendar and look up a region and see what they've got going on, right? So that's what we do.
I think it's so cool. And I love that there's a death positive movement.
Yeah.
I do think it's a privilege and an honor to be with somebody at their, in their final stage of life.
Amen.
That's beautiful. So I'm sure this is not news to you either, but we have a caregiving crisis upon us where there's
Absolutely.
not enough supply of professional caregivers to help the growing demand and the needs that we have. And one of the reasons I'd heard of is the decline is the lack of competitive pay. What are your thoughts? Like, what are your thoughts on why we need more people in this? I know. Like, what do you wish would be true? Maybe that's
So what I would absolutely wish, and every single day I wish when I walk in, that we have caregivers that provided good care. So I myself provide incredible care. I hold myself to a standard to providing good care, and that not only encompasses physical care, but mental, emotional, and spiritual care. And right now, we have a lot of caregivers who are tired from the pandemic. We're tired. We didn't get a break. We didn't get a quarantine unless we had COVID. So we have been going nonstop. So you've had the people who are genuinely concerned with their safety. You also have, of course, we cannot say that wages are a problem, because we are absolutely at a point where certified nurses aides, and especially caregiving agencies, and adult family homes, skilled nursing facilities oftentimes pay less than hospitals do, right? So, and of course, when people leave the hospital, where are they going? Adult family homes, to their own home, or to an assisted living, right? And each one of those levels of care are amazing, but have their problems. So we need to be paid well. And we are in a staffing crisis. We are having high turnovers. People are, like I said, they're tired, they're burnt out. They are finding other avenues to pursue after sometimes 30, 20 years of providing, nursing care. They are now looking to other avenues, or they're looking to retire, because it's so much work. It is
Burnout. Yeah.
burnout, the documentation, the staff. Of course, if we can't keep staff that stays has to work a little bit harder. So all of those things are coming together, and I wish I could say that there was one thing that would fix it all. But I don't know what that is just yet.
Yeah. Money helps probably.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I think that, so it's funny that we're talking about this, because in the hub, I shared this meme myself, that McDonald's is paying $21 an hour, right? Okay, and so it has sparked a lot of conversation on both sides. Some CNAs are upset that somebody who has a food handler's card and works at McDonald's is making more than they do taking care of another human being and
What
holding a
does the
space.
average person
So
care?
it's basically, it goes off of experience, right? So what I make at 19 years is going to be significantly higher than someone who's only been a CNA for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So most states pay off of that experience scale. So they
Okay.
could go anywhere from $10 to $20 an hour, depending on their experience. So you
Right.
can see how somebody working for $10 an hour would be super upset that someone at McDonald's is making $21 an hour. So
Yes.
they're going to say, to heck with this, and they're going to go to McDonald's.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
So
phone it in and make some burgers and not have all this other risk.
right,
I
which
know.
is which is part of the problem. So we are at a spot where McDonald's is paying that amount of money to their workers because they don't have enough workers, right? Well, neither does healthcare, but healthcare is unwilling to pay
For now, we,
for
we
now,
yes.
So I think that's kind of where we're finding ourselves.
They're not only unwilling, but like, so it's impacting you in the professional way, and then you in a family caregiver way when you were caring for your dad, because
Mm-hmm.
we're pushing people out of the system and requiring family caregivers to do
Absolutely.
things I never thought I would ever have to do in my
No,
life.
absolutely. Right. So that's the number one thing that I see is people have come home on hospice, and their families have literally no idea what they've just been sent home to do. And so it's my job to come in as the home health aide to really make sure that they understand how to provide total bed bound care to that actively transitioning person, and sometimes that is a challenge when we are met with, that 48 to 73 hours. If someone is actively transitioning, that we have to pull all of these hospice resources and education together to overwhelmed people who have no grasp for this, more or less to retain what you just told them in about
Right. And
45
they're
minutes.
emotionally connected to this person.
Completely.
Yeah.
So
So
that's where end of life doulas come into play as well. They are absolutely there to be present at hospice visits, to retain that information, to make phone calls on behalf of the family. If you are looking for a caregiving agency, the social worker is going to hand you a list and say, have at it. And now you have to do that. So an end of life doula, as long as they've been given permission, they can absolutely make those calls and get prices, and price out all of those different agencies. Same with funeral homes. I mean, all of these things, end of life doulas are
business.
really there to
Mhm.
pick up those gaps that hospice is unable to do at this.
Yes, that is exhausting in so many ways, physically and emotionally. I mean, with COVID, I'm sure you've encountered a lot of people who are new caregivers or expectant caregivers. Like, what advice do you have for them?
Take a deep breath.
Mm,
It's all going to be okay. It might not seem like it now, but for some reason, and my own philosophy, and pardon my French, through my entire journey was, this shit is not forever.
yeah, it's a
So
season.
this is going to end at some point. And even though it's all falling apart right now, it's all going to work out. I just kept telling myself everything is going to work out. And my dad's final days and final weeks of his life, it's quite the amazing story, actually, because so I
You got
actually
to know
work for the
it. Yeah.
hospital. You got to know it. So
Yeah.
I actually worked for the hospital that had the first COVID death in the United States, right?
Oh,
So I
wow.
work in the outpatient. Yes. So I work in the outpatient aspect. So I work in the greater Seattle area, and I work in the general area with which that hospital is. So, and in that time, everything was really unknown. We didn't have all of the criteria that we have now to screen, patients and families. Everything was changing by hour, and we had really no idea what to expect. I think in the beginning, all of us thought, well, it's in the hospital. We're an outpatient. We've dodged that bullet. That was kind of my first thing, was like, oh, don't worry. And I even told my grandma, don't worry, grandma, it's okay. I'm not in the hospital. I'm not working in a COVID unit. Just don't worry about it. But I quickly realized we have an entire census of 500 plus patients who have comorbidities that mimic COVID, right? So
Mm.
we were only looking for 3 of those symptoms in the beginning, in the first 2 weeks. So I ended up getting COVID from a patient who we had no idea, and at that time, the CDC was saying we didn't need masks, that it wasn't going to help. So, I ended up getting COVID, and that was 2 weeks before my dad passed, right? And so I got into my first week, and my dad had an episode where he became non-responsive. And my dad was all over the news. I mean, he was worried about COVID in January, and he was calling hospice. He was able to call hospice on his phone and be like, I'm concerned about COVID. And all of us were kind of like, what? And then things started to really happen. So he had been super all over the news. So as soon as everything came out, I stopped seeing him 4 or 5 weeks before he actually passed. I stopped physically going into that home because I knew I was out in this community,
Mhm.
right? So I didn't actually tell him that I had COVID. I just kept telling him I had the flu and I'll be okay. Don't worry. And it was a really mild case. I mean, of course, I was terrified because we were seeing such horrible things on the news. And, but I just kind of kept that down. And then I was into the first week, and he really started to decline. And I remember him calling me and getting frustrated on a Wednesday about his computer. Like, if you can't be here to take care of my computer, who's going to do
Yeah, your
this?
tech support. You're not just a caregiver, you're tech support.
everything. You are everything.
Yes.
So I was like, I could just tell. And he was having a lot of life review. He was having a lot of, frustration, as a 66-year-old man dying would, the fact that this is where we are. And I remember saying to him, are you upset because things are changing? And he said, yeah. Yeah. And so that was on a Wednesday. And by Friday, he was minimally responsive. And I got a call. And of course, my quarantine ended on that Saturday. But I got a call that the adult family home, that my dad was really restless and he was tired, and that they could no longer, that they essentially wanted him to go to our hospice care center. So a lot of hospices have inpatient centers that you have to meet a certain criteria to be in. It may be different from state to state, but for Medicare to pay for an inpatient stay on hospice, symptoms have to be unmanageable at home, right? We've tried every intervention and it's not working. So basically, the night before he got restless, and he was non-responsive in this time, I kept going back and forth with the adult family home, and either the FaceTime wasn't working or he was sleeping. And I was like, okay. So, and I knew my dad was waiting for me because he kept saying to me the Wednesday before, you can just really come here. And I said, no, Dad, I just really can't, because I hadn't told him I had COVID.
Right.
I just
Right.
had the flu, and I just really can't. And so I knew he was waiting for me, right? And
Waiting for you to tell him goodbye. And
well, just, yeah, basically he was waiting for me to be there, I think, really and truly. So finally I told the caregiver, it was like 9:00 at night on a Friday. And I had said, or maybe it was Thursday night, because I said, you better put that phone to his head. I don't care if he's sleeping. I don't care. You better do it now, or I'm going to walk in there with COVID. Like, don't mess with me and my dad. Like, you better do that. And so I just got on the phone and I told them, I said, Dad, I can't come. They're not going to let me come because I'm very ill right now. And I need you to go, that it's okay for you to go, because I do not want you to sit and wait in a vessel that does not serve you. It's time to go. And he got so restless that night. And I really, truly believe it was because he was saying, oh, hells to the no. I'm not leaving here without my family. Yeah. So I was extremely blessed that our hospice care center had a COVID wing already. We actually took all of the comfort care COVID patients from other hospices into hospitals into our hospice. So we already had a wing set up for COVID, even though my dad didn't have COVID. So the amazing, incredible people at Evergreen Hospice brought my dad to the hospice care center and allowed me to put on full PPE and be with my dad for the last 3 days of his life.
Aw, I love that.
I know. So we got to just listen to tunes, and and I truly believe that he was not going to leave this world until Cassidy was right there at that bedside. He just wasn't.
Yeah. Everybody's different, right? Like, I know some people, like my husband's mom, she chose nobody. She was pretty much a loner and liked her alone. And then my dad, everybody needed to be around. My mom was kind of, somewhere in the middle type of thing. But I do think people, you got to know your person. And I do think almost in every situation, I feel like we had to grant some kind of permission. We had to let them know that, like, we're going to miss you, but we're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, and people wait until somebody gets there, or they wait until somebody leaves.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes that's one of the hardest conversations I have to have with people is, please do not feel, and I don't want to use the word devastated, because death and losing your person is always devastating, no matter how prepared you are for it. But it's not like you didn't do something wrong if you weren't there, right? Like, if they leave when you take that 5 minutes to go to the bathroom. For myself, I held my dad's hand for oh gosh, hours. And I was exhausted. I was so tired. And I finally took a moment and I sat next to him. I had his hand on my leg and I was sitting next to him and I was eating chicken. And that was it. I was like, he's not breathing. And I literally said, really, man?
Really, the chicken? Like you're picking the
Really,
chicken?
the
No, I'm never gonna look at
chicken?
chicken the same. Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, really? Like I was waiting for that pivotal moment, but he needed me to not, that's how I felt. Like he needed me to not be on him. He needed me to be back a little bit,
Yeah.
and so everybody's soul makes that decision really and truly when it's ready.
I think that's amazing. You, Cassidy, you have a widely popular and wonderful Facebook group called the
I
Caregivers
do.
Hub Support. And you started it, I think, somewhere around 5 years ago. What
Hmm.
initiated that, and what are you hoping people can gain from that?
Oh my goodness. So the Caregivers Hub Support group actually started out as a Facebook fan page, right? And it was really just my way. At that point in time, I was working in home care for a home care agency. I had finally left skilled nursing, right? Because I started in a tiny town in Montana at 18, the only nursing facility in this tiny town. And so I had been in skilled nursing facilities between Montana and Washington with some private care. But now I was working for a home care agency. And I want to say that most certified nurses aides working in skilled nursing facilities are, as we've said, really undervalued,
Hmm.
right? But the knowledge and the skills that they have are so incredibly valuable. And it was really my way at that time to empower myself to realize that I'm not just somebody who wipes other people's behinds, right? That I am this skilled clinician with knowledge and value. And so I started just to create content on a fan page for caregivers because I felt like if anything I had to say was going to benefit somebody caring for their loved one, then I had a moral obligation to do that.
Hmm.
So I just started creating content and joining groups and sharing content. And then I fastly found that I was getting kicked out of all these groups for sharing content. Just because I don't even know why. I'm not even get into that, but honestly, I said to heck with all of you people, and I'm just going to start a support group for myself so it can run the way that I want it to run,
Hmm.
right? I don't want people to be chastised for using colorful language. I want people to be able to share how they feel without being bullied or berated by other caregivers for their decisions. So I really set out to create an environment where caregivers felt supported and safe to share their journeys and the realness of what they go through. And just by cultivating that atmosphere, of let's all just be good to each other and not be hateful, it has slowly grown to almost 7,000 members all over the world.
That's
And
amazing.
they all post all the time.
Yeah, and it is very, and you do a great job of you and your team. I think you have help of moderating
Mhm.
it and making sure, because I know too, like I've got my self-care support for caregivers group, and
Mhm.
people do kind of try to come in and plop their things in and leave, and they're not interacting.
Right.
So you also created a space for those people. So
Yes, yes,
not to come
because
to you this,
rapidly,
yes.
yes,
So what's
yes,
that?
it had to be done. So I started the Caregivers Hub Marketplace because we started seeing a lot of not just caregivers posting, but we had this really weird moment where we had a lot of caregivers who were at home caring for their loved ones and had side businesses, right, that they were trying to promote. And most of them were caregiver related. And then we have a lot of students who come and want knowledge from caregivers with surveys and all sorts of stuff. We have caregivers looking for jobs, and we have people wanting caregivers for jobs. And basically, we started the Caregivers Hub Marketplace, or I should say I did, because I did start it,
Yes.
because we wanted to keep the integrity around support, in the main group, that this is not to solicit other caregivers for your products, your services, your whatevers, that this is for you to provide value and your experience and your knowledge to other caregivers who are having an issue. And we have professional caregivers, we have family caregivers, we have doctors, we have social workers, we have so many other people in the hub, and I just we all of my moderators, I have about 10 moderators, and the beautiful thing about these moderators are they saw value in the hub, and all of these moderators have been with me since 2016. They believe in what we do. They actively work hard to make sure people are being good to each other, to approve join requests, or 86 somebody if they need it, all of these things. So the Caregivers Hub Marketplace is that spot where you can go and promote whatever it is that you want to promote, but just not in our main
Not in the support. Yes, because I think it loses its
integrity.
yeah, the integrity in the spotlight. And I can appreciate that, because I do the similar thing with this podcast. Like, I get lots and lots and lots of requests for people to be on the podcast, but I have chosen to maintain the integrity that I want to spotlight current and former family caregivers. Now, they may also have businesses and work in the caregiving space or written a book or something, but they got to have lived in the trenches. And
absolutely.
yeah, so that's important to me as well. I get that. Well, very cool. How do you, and we'll link to both of those Facebook groups in the show notes page.
Perfect.
How do you practice self-care? I've noticed something very interesting about your self-care practices.
So I have a lot, but I've narrowed it down to sometimes it's with intention and sometimes it's not. That sometimes I have to find the time that I have available, even if it's 15 minutes to, maybe it's to deep breathe, maybe it's to scream, maybe it's to cry. I don't know what it is exactly, but I have to find that time for that. I've started making mandalas on the beach.
Yes.
Which I love that. Okay, so the deeply spiritual end of life advocate and death doula that I am. So when I say I'm deeply spiritual, I feel like I have a great connection with spirit, and sometimes I get messages, but not like people are talking to me. Maybe it's numbers, maybe it's a song that my dad resonated with, or my stepdad, or people that I've lost, right? Maybe, but mainly it's birds of prey, it's hawks, it's eagles. They just seem to be in these places when I need them the most. And I've realized that they have always kind of been these little sentries in my life that I've connected to. And so there's this junction to this freeway, and underneath it runs another major road. And I often take this road when I'm going into my hospice travels. And there was always early in the morning, this hawk sitting on this wire, right? And I haven't seen him in a while. And this wire is directly above this underpass, right? And so I'm always in that area all around, and I haven't seen that hawk in a while. And I was driving under one day, and I started to think about this hawk, and then it looked like my hawk had died under this freeway, right? So I was like, I think that's my hawk. I think it's my hawk. And so it's going to sound so weird. For like 3 weeks, I drove by this bird, and I just kept thinking to myself, out of every other thing in the universe, this is my hawk, and this is what he means to me. And I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to go and honor its vessel in some way. So I got this big bouquet of flowers, and at the butt crack of dawn, when there was not a lot of cars, I drove down there. And I'm laughing because when
I
I
love
got
this
there,
story.
I was so perplexed. I'm not lying when I say I was so perplexed about, I was literally ready to go and gather this, this thing.
Roadkill. This
Yes, roadkill, right? And so, and I didn't kind of know what I was going to do. And I got there
What'd
and
you
it was
bring? A shovel, a garbage bag?
no, so actually I had a box and like another box and I was like, okay, it should be about this big. I can just scoot it in there and off I go with it. And then I got there and I'm not lying, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning and the sun started to come up and it was a mallard. It was a duck.
It wasn't
And
your
it
mom.
wasn't even my bird. So I was like, oh no. But here I had this bouquet and I had this intention that I was going to honor my spirit guides and all of the beautiful things that they bring to me. So I said a little humana to the mallard and then off I went down to the beach because it was a beautiful morning. And I just started to build this beautiful mandala with all these little pieces of flowers and foliage and things I had found on the beach. And the craziest part is as I'm like paying homage and I'm building this thing and it's such good self-care. I could breathe and the waves and it just felt so good. There came this huge eagle out of nowhere in the sky and just flying above and around. And so I decided that this was going to be something that I do every single month to pay homage to all that is holy in my life and to give myself a moment.
I just left the beach a couple weeks ago because I was like, darn it, those are pictures are beautiful. We'll post some of your mandala pictures in the show notes page.
Mhm.
But what a cool thing. So it wasn't like it just kind of came to you. It wasn't
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
something you found on Pinterest or
No, it was something that, and like I said, I had not intended to do this on the beach, right? I had intended to kind of build this mandala around my hawk. And I want to say I got the inspiration for building these things and not necessarily a mandala. There's a book called Reimagining Death by Lucinda Herring, and she is a home funeral guide and chaplain and she's just an amazing being here on Whidbey Island. And she wrote this book and she focuses and her work is that she guides that family through a home funeral, how to keep that person home after they die. They're not just whisked away to some funeral home where we can't see them.
Mhm.
That they are there, that we are actively taking part in their after death care. And she has this beautiful ritual of going into nature and pulling in these beautiful things in nature and arranging them around the graves and on top of the shrouds. And so I kind of had that in my mind already. And that's such a beautiful tribute. So that's kind of where the mandala came from. But I started building out from the middle out. And that's how, if you're going to color a mandala or build it, you build from the inside out. And the
Mhm.
colors and everything is kind of what you feel, right? So that's kind of what I set out.
I'm
I was like,
inspired with all the
you
fall.
should.
Yes, with all the fall foliage and stuff. I think it would be a really cool thing to and like you said, there's so many, you're soaking up the vitamin D, you're breathing in the air, you're noticing Mother Nature's
Right.
beauty and you're grateful and so
Yeah.
many good things that are all and creative. I love it. It's great. Well, very cool. I know you do some other things too, but I want to definitely save some time for the
Mhm.
lightning round.
Absolutely. For sure.
So we do the lightning round as part of the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast with our spotlight guests. And so we're on the topic of self-care. All of these are just daily little intentions. They're prompts that hopefully, created with caregivers in mind, but hopefully just get people thinking about self-care intentionally.
Yeah.
Um, so I picked out some questions for you. Let's see what we got here. Um, Okay, well, we've got Halloween kind of coming up, even though this is going to air after it. But what's something that you were afraid to do and did it anyway?
Around Halloween?
Or anything? Just what's if something you were afraid to do? It just made me think of. fear.
Well, definitely taking a bouquet of flowers on a busy road and the butt crack of dawn
Yes.
terrified me. Oh my goodness. Well, I want to say so many things. I just to be able to cut on the video and grow the Caregivers Hub, that putting yourself out there to the world, that's scary, and I did it anyways. Um, I actually started talking to my hospice colleagues and the higher ups in my hospice about end of life doulas and the work that they do. And that was scary for me because I've always felt like I've always been trepidatious. It's always been, stay in your lane, keep your mouth shut and do your work. And everything will be okay. So by me just opening up and saying that this is what I do and this is what I'm going to be building a practice around, that was scary, but I did it anyways. So lots of things.
And have
Lots
they
of
all
things.
turned out better than you anticipated?
So yes, actually. So by actually speaking about end of life doulas, I was encouraged by one of our hospice managers to apply for the Washington State Hospice and Palliative Care conference to speak about end of life doulas. So I applied and I was accepted, and I was building everything, and then they canceled the conference and moved it to April.
Well, it's just moved.
But
Yes.
just moved. So as soon as they figure out what they're going to do, I've already been told that I will be speaking about end of life doulas to the
I love
Washington
it.
State Hospice and Palliative Care. Yeah.
Yes, you stepped out of your comfort zone. Good for you.
Yeah.
Paying off. What's your favorite thing about fall?
Oh, it has to be the leaves. But I think more than that, it's when you get that really crisp, sunny day. The air is cool, but it's not so cold. And the colors, all of those things are my favorite. And it's actually something that my dad and I used to do a lot. We would go to the Arboretum here in Seattle around this time. And I've actually noticed that I'm really noticing all the colors this year, and they're super vibrant. And I was actually driving home from work today and I said, Dad, are you doing this? Are you like making this like a 2 or 3, 4 week, like beautiful, fall colors, just so you can still see what these are?
I love
So
it. I
I
love
love
it. I
fall.
know it's like just when we used to do the same thing. It's like, oh, that's my favorite color, and then you pass something else like, oh no, no, it's this one. This is my favorite. The mix of, I know they're all good. It's hard to pick. What is something other people thank you for?
Oh, all of the time being supportive, providing comfort, my knowledge, my wisdom, my heart, my kindness, all
Nice.
of those
Well, it's
things.
all radiating today. I love it. I love it. Is there anything else, Cassidy, that you wish that we were going to talk about today that you just don't want to leave this show without putting this out there?
No, I think we touched on almost every aspect. We talked about end of life doulas and end of life, and I appreciate you going there. I was kind of wondering how this would be if we would touch on death and dying and end of life and how that would be perceived.
We go
Because
deep.
good, because we need to go deep.
I want to be part of the movement of, would you say, death positive movement?
Yes.
Count me in.
So you can actually, there are so many. I was actually just thinking about starting or doing oh, where is it? I lost it. It's not in here. But there's so many death positive books, right? That I would love to like have a death positive book club, right? Where we like pick out a book and then we talk about it. You can
Mhm.
absolutely hold your own death cafe. Start having conversations in your group about a death positive movement. My number one thing that I want to say before I get off of here is plan while you're well what your end of life is going to look like. Don't be afraid of that. I was thinking about there was this one moment when I was clearing out my dad's apartment and I was having to go through all of these boxes of things that I knew in 6 months he would not they were of no importance to me, but they were important to him.
Mhm.
And now I had to go through an entire life of what was valuable to myself and what was not. And I was angry and I was frustrated that at 34, 35, I was having to do this. And I just said out loud, I said, damn it, if you don't prepare your children for your death and your dying, you have failed as a parent. To leave somebody with all of this is just bullshit.
Yes.
I said that. And so that is what the death positive movement is about, is that we are preparing for our death and our dying well before we're ever there. And I'll tell you, it makes the difference every single time between a good death and a tumultuous death. When things are prepared for, we can have a peaceful passing. There's nothing that our children have to do that has not already been done. There's no choices that anybody has to make that have not already been made. Everybody's on the same page. We can just get to the business of dying and having the space and the sacredness to do that. So
Yes.
that's how I would love to leave this.
Yeah, it's a gift for the person who's dying as well as the care recipient, the care or the caregivers and the care team, because to
Yes.
your point, you can just be present.
Mhm.
You want it's a gift to just be present. Well, thank you, Cassidy, for enlightening me and our group today, our listeners. We're going to link to some of the stuff that you shared in the show notes page, and I know people. I'll link to the Caregivers Hub Support, but if people want to also find you, where's a good place to kind of learn more about the services and the offerings that you put out there?
So my website is My End of Life Northwest. That's myendoflifenw.com. You can also find about end of life doula services. You can contact me on my business page, which is on Facebook, which is Facebook/ My End of Life Northwest NW again. On my Instagram, Cassidy _O's_85 on Instagram. There's a link tree that has a link to the Caregivers Hub, to our monthly Death Cafe events, right? So that's a direct link to the event. All you have to do is sign on to the event, click going, and the Zoom link is in that event on Facebook. So you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me in
I
all
love
of
it.
those places.
Thank you so much for touching lives and being of support for caregivers. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on today.
You're so welcome.